What you're about to hear isn't just a story about loss. It's about a night that tore apart everything a mother believed in. Stay until the end, because the truth that emerged from Boulder's quiet mountains will change how you see family trust and love forever. The unthinkable. The phone call came at 2:17 a.m. I've always feared middle-of-the-night calls, those harbingers of news too terrible to wait for daylight. My trembling hand reached for the phone on the third ring. "Mrs. Reed, this is Boulder General Hospital. Your son James has been admitted with a suspected brain aneurysm. You should come immediately." The world tilted on its axis. At 65, I had lived through my husband's death a decade earlier, but nothing had prepared me for this moment. James, my brilliant, kind-hearted only child, couldn't be dying. It wasn't the natural order of things. I arrived at the hospital still wearing my nightgown beneath my coat hair, uncombed hands, shaking as I gave my name at the reception desk. A grim-faced doctor led me to a private consultation room, and the words that followed destroyed my world. Massive aneurysm. No warning signs, no chance of survival. They let me see him. His face was calm, his chest rising and falling under the rhythm of the ventilator. Machines hummed softly around him, keeping a heartbeat that wasn't truly his anymore. I pressed my palm against his arm, whispering the lullabies I once sang when he was a child, afraid of thunderstorms in our old mountain house. Hours passed like minutes and minutes like eternities. I couldn't tell the difference between prayer and denial anymore. At 5:42 a.m., the doctor returned with a clipboard. "Mrs. Reed, he's gone." The rest of that day unfolded in fragments. The sterile corridors, the smell of disinfectant, the murmur of nurses avoiding eye contact. Signing forms I couldn't read, answering questions I couldn't process. Outside, the Colorado dawn crept across the snow-tipped peaks, painting the horizon pink and gold, an insultingly beautiful morning for a world that had just ended. When I stepped outside, the air bit into my lungs. My neighbor Ruth was waiting in her old Subaru, face pale with worry. She drove me home in silence, only reaching out once to place her hand on mine. "You're not alone, Caroline," she said. But I was. I had never been more alone. 2 days later, Alyssa Monroe arrived, James's wife. Her beauty struck me the way ice catches sunlight, sharp, dazzling, but cold. She wore black designer sunglasses, though it was cloudy, her coat pristine, her voice calm. "I've already contacted the funeral home," she said, her tone brisk, efficient. James would have wanted it simple. I nodded, though something inside me tightened. Alyssa had always been distant, polite, but unreachable, like she was playing a role she didn't believe in. The funeral took place 3 days later at a small chapel overlooking the foothills. People came, said kind things, cried, and left. I stood beside the casket numb, while Alyssa stood a few feet away holding Owen's hand, my grandson's small fingers swallowed by hers. He was only 8. His eyes looked lost. That night when I returned to the house, I found the envelope. My name was written in James's handwriting. Inside, a letter dated 2 weeks before his death. "Mom, if you're reading this, something's gone wrong. I've been feeling strange headaches but didn't want to worry you. If anything happens to me, please make sure Owen is safe. Alyssa has changed. There are things I discovered, things I can't yet prove. I've left files in my office. Trust Andrew Keller. He knows everything." The letter slipped from my hands. For a long moment, all I could hear was the wind howling against the windows. I thought of Alyssa's perfect calm at the hospital, her readiness, the way she avoided looking at me during the service. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. The next morning, I drove to James's office in downtown Boulder. His desk was bare except for a photo of Owen in a sealed manila folder marked Private, Keller. Inside were documents, financial statements, emails, and a draft of a new will naming me as Owen's guardian should anything happen to him. My heart pounded as I scanned the signatures. It was dated just 5 days before the aneurysm. By noon, I was sitting in Andrew Keller's office, a modest space lined with law books and mountain photographs. He greeted me gently, his expression grave. "Carolyn, I was afraid this would happen. James came to me 2 weeks ago. He suspected Alyssa was moving large amounts of money into a private account under someone else's name. Whose name, I whispered. Derek Vaughn, he said. The name hit me like a gust of freezing air. I'd met Derek once, a business partner Alyssa had called him. Too young, too charming, too familiar. Andrew slid a folder toward me. "There's more. James asked me to prepare custody documents. He was afraid Alyssa might try to take Owen abroad." I couldn't breathe. The room tilted, the air heavy with betrayal and fear. "What can we do?" I asked. "For now, nothing," Andrew said, "but if she makes a move, we'll be ready." Move. That night I watched Alyssa from the window as she arrived in a sleek black car, Owen in the back seat. She looked up at the house, eyes unreadable. I didn't know then how far she would go, how many lines she was willing to cross. But I knew this: I had lost my son, and I would not lose my grandson. Not to her, not to anyone. Stay until the very end, because what Caroline discovers next will not only expose the truth about James's death, it will reveal a betrayal that reaches far beyond the walls of their mountain home. What you're about to hear isn't just about loss, it's about the moment a mother realizes that the truth behind her son's death might be darker than anyone dares to admit. Stay until the end, because what happened in Boulder that winter night will make you question how well we ever know the people closest to us. The call came at 2:17 a.m. There's something about that hour, how silence thickens, how the world feels thinner, like reality itself could crack if you breathe too hard. I had just drifted back to sleep when the phone on my nightstand began to buzz, a faint light trembling in the darkness of my bedroom. "Mrs. Reed, this is Boulder General Hospital. Your son James has been admitted with a suspected brain aneurysm. You should come immediately." Those words didn't make sense at first, like they'd been spoken underwater. Aneurysm, admitted, come immediately. My mind couldn't put them in a straight line. At 65, I'd learned that life changes in two kinds of ways: slowly, like a mountain eroding, or suddenly, like a rock slide that doesn't give you time to move. That night, it was both. I remember the hiss of the winter wind against my window, the sound of my own heartbeat as I threw on my coat, the way my fingers couldn't quite tie the scarf. My car engine coughed before starting, headlights cutting through the swirling snow as I drove down the empty highway toward the hospital. The roads were deserted, and for a moment, I thought about how peaceful Boulder looked from the ridge, the sleeping houses, the faint glow of porch lights, the dark outline of the Flatirons. It was all too quiet, too still for what was about to come. When I reached the hospital, the fluorescent lights seemed almost cruel. A young nurse at the desk glanced up with that practiced mixture of sympathy and distance. "Caroline Reed." I managed to say, my voice breaking. "My son James Reed. You called me." She nodded and spoke softly into her headset. Moments later, a doctor appeared. He looked tired, his scrubs wrinkled, a surgical mask hanging loosely around his neck. "Mrs. Reed, please come with me." We walked down a corridor that smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain-soaked wool. My shoes squeaked against the polished floor. He led me into a small consultation room where the clock on the wall ticked far too loud. "I'm afraid the aneurysm ruptured before he arrived. We did everything we could." The words slid off him like rehearsed lines in a play he'd said too many times, but to me they hit like a hammer. They let me see him. He looked so peaceful, almost like he was napping. The machines around him beeped with cruel calmness. I took his hand. It was warm, deceptively alive, and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. You can rest." But I didn't mean it. I wasn't ready for him to rest. Hours blurred. I signed forms I didn't read, answered questions I didn't hear. At 5:42 a.m., when the doctor quietly said, "He's gone," something in me cracked, but not loudly. It was the quiet kind of breaking, the kind that leaves no sound, only a hollow space where your breath used to be. When I stepped outside, dawn was breaking over the mountains. The world was indifferent. Snow clung to tree branches like fragile lace. I remember thinking how unfair it was that beauty could still exist when your world had ended. My neighbor Ruth drove me home. She didn't say much, just reached over once and squeezed my hand. "You're not alone, Caroline," she said. But I was. Later that afternoon, the house felt too large, too clean. James's photos still hung on the hallway wall, him as a boy holding a fishing rod, his first day at CU Boulder, the day he married Alyssa. That last photo made my stomach tighten. Alyssa Monroe. My daughter-in-law was stunning, poised, the kind of woman who could light up a room and freeze it at the same time. She had called once from an unknown number to say she was handling arrangements. Her voice was calm, almost professional. "Caroline, I'll take care of everything," she'd said. James would have wanted it simple. Simple? That word felt wrong for a man like my son. That evening, when I couldn't bear the silence any longer, I turned on his phone. The police had returned it to me with his wallet and watch, everything neatly bagged and labeled personal effects. The screen lit up. His last messages were to me. The top one was from 7 days before he died. "James' mom, look who I ran into today, old client turned business partner. Life's weird." Attached was a photo. James smiling in front of a red brick building downtown. Beside him stood a man I recognized vaguely, Derek Vaughn, someone I'd met once at a fundraiser too. Young too slick, the kind of man who remembered your name for reasons that had nothing to do with kindness. But it wasn't Derek who froze me. It was the reflection in the window behind them, a woman with long blonde hair wearing a wedding ring on her right hand. Alyssa's hair was dark, always had been. My heart stuttered. For a long moment I just stared, trying to convince myself it was nothing, a trick of light, a stranger passing by. But something deep inside me whispered otherwise. I zoomed in. The woman's face was blurred, but she was smiling toward James. The timestamp on the photo read 1 week before his death. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house felt like a message I couldn't decode. I sat by the fireplace with that phone on my lap, the image glowing faintly in the dark. Grief and suspicion don't mix well. They turn your thoughts into traps. Every memory starts to rearrange itself. You start asking questions you're not sure you want answered. Had James mentioned headaches? Yes. Had Alyssa seemed distant lately? Yes. Had she known about Derek before the funeral? I didn't want to think so, but the photo kept whispering otherwise. By morning I made coffee I didn't drink and opened the letter James had left, the one the hospital gave me. Mom, if you're reading this, it means I didn't listen to your advice about slowing down. But I need you to know something. If anything ever happens to me, make sure Owen is safe. Alyssa's not the same. Trust Andrew Keller. He'll help you. Andrew, his lawyer, his friend. I held the letter with trembling hands, the edges blurred with my tears. Somewhere between grief and anger, a strange calm settled over me. At 10 a.m., Alyssa arrived. Black coat, black sunglasses, not a hair out of place. She hugged me without touching, the kind of embrace that looks right to others but feels empty inside. I'm so sorry, Caroline, she said, her voice smooth as polished glass. I know how close you two were. James adored you. Did he? I said softly. Her head tilted slightly, a flicker of irritation crossing her perfect face. I'll handle the funeral. You shouldn't worry about details. And just like that, she was gone, leaving behind a trace of expensive perfume in a colder room. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the photo still open on my phone. I kept staring at the reflection of that blonde woman and asking the same question over and over. Who was she? The wind howled outside, shaking the windows. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote cried out, a lonely, haunting sound that made the hair on my arms rise. I told myself I was imagining things, that grief plays tricks on memory. But then the phone buzzed again. A text, unknown number. Caroline, this is Andrew Keller. We need to talk. Urgent. The screen dimmed before I could reply. And in the reflection, just for a heartbeat, I thought I saw movement behind me, but when I turned, the room was empty. Would you trust your instincts if the truth could destroy your family? If you think Caroline should dig deeper, press 1. If you think she should let it go, press 0. Either way, stay until the end, because the next thing she discovers will change everything. This isn't just another tragedy. It's one of those betrayal stories where the truth hides in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to destroy every illusion of safety. Stay until the end, because what Caroline finds next will turn grief into suspicion and suspicion into proof. Caroline stared at the phone long after the message from Andrew Keller faded from the screen. We need to talk. Urgent. The house was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. The air felt heavier now, as if the walls themselves had heard something she hadn't yet understood. At dawn, she made herself coffee she didn't want and sat by the window watching snow melt into small silver rivers on the road. Somewhere a plow scraped against ice. Ordinary sounds of life continued, oblivious to how hers had changed. She replayed the message in her head. Andrew's tone wasn't the professional calm of an attorney. It carried strain, fear, urgency. She called him back. Straight to voicemail. At 8:13 a.m., the phone rang again. Caroline, it's Andrew. I didn't want to say this over text. Can you come by the office this morning? His voice sounded tight, controlled, like someone choosing every word carefully. Yes, she said. I'll be there. Boulder looked washed out under winter light. The mountains loomed quiet, their shadows long and thin across the highway. Andrew Keller's office sat above a law firm downtown, narrow, lined with glass, overlooking Pearl Street. He greeted her at the door, his expression grim but kind. Caroline, he said softly, guiding her in. I'm sorry for your loss. I really am. She nodded, eyes swollen from sleepless nights. You said you needed to talk. He gestured toward a chair. On the desk lay a folder marked Reed Estate, confidential. I was going through James's files yesterday. Andrew began finalizing the insurance papers, but I found something strange. He opened the folder. Inside was a single page, printed emails highlighted in yellow. It's correspondence between James and Alyssa, he said, about money, large transfers made from his company account into one registered under Vaughn Holdings. Derek Vaughn, Caroline whispered. Andrew nodded slowly. Exactly, and it gets worse. He pulled out another sheet, a scanned contract. This document shows James was preparing to revoke Alyssa's financial power of attorney. He was going to transfer control of his assets to a trust with you as temporary guardian until Owen turned 18. Caroline blinked. He never told me. He didn't get the chance, Andrew said quietly. The room spun. She clutched the edge of the desk. Are you saying? I'm saying it looks bad, he interrupted gently. But without proof of coercion or foul play, the court will treat it as coincidence. And Caroline, he hesitated. Alyssa's already hired her own counsel. She's moving quickly. Caroline's breath caught. Moving how? She's listed the house for sale, he said, under her maiden name. For a long moment, Caroline said nothing. The tick of the wall clock filled the silence. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out James's phone. There's more, she said, opening the photo she'd found. Look. Andrew leaned closer, his brow furrowed. That reflection, that's not Alyssa. I thought so too, Caroline whispered. And this was taken a week before he died. He nodded. Then we need to find out who she is. That night, Caroline drove back home as dusk fell. The sky was bruised purple over the Rockies. When she opened the front door, the house felt colder than usual. She turned up the thermostat, poured herself a glass of water, and sat down at the kitchen table with James's phone again. She stared at the photo until her eyes ached, zooming and zooming out as if the pixels themselves might confess something. Then as she scrolled through his messages, something else caught her attention, an unfamiliar app, VoiceSafe. It wasn't one James usually used. She tapped it. There was one saved recording, the timestamp 2 days before he died. Her pulse spiked. She pressed play. At first just static, then James's voice shaky, whispering, If you're hearing this, Mom, it means I didn't make it in time. Someone's been following me. I think it's connected to Alyssa's deals with Derek. Please trust Andrew. Keep Owen safe. Don't let her take him. I'll send proof tonight. The message ended abruptly with a faint metallic clatter like keys falling. Caroline froze. Her hands trembled as she replayed it. Then she replayed it again. Shock burned through grief like lightning through clouds. It wasn't just death now, it was deception layers deep. She called Andrew immediately, but it went to voicemail. So she left a message, Andrew, call me back right now. I found a recording. James knew something. Then she forwarded the audio to his email. She sat there afterward, the phone on the table, staring at the last line of James's letter. If anything happens to me, protect Owen. A noise outside broke her trance, gravel crunching under tires. Headlights swept across her living room window. She pulled the curtain back slightly. Alyssa's black SUV was parked by the curb. Caroline's heart lurched. Alyssa stepped out, phone in hand, pacing. The motion light above the porch flicked on, illuminating her face. Even from inside, Caroline could see the tension in her jaw, the clipped movements of someone barely keeping calm. Moments later, Alyssa knocked. 3 sharp taps. Caroline hesitated, then opened the door halfway. Caroline, Alyssa said, voice-controlled, eyes hidden behind dark lenses, even though the night had fallen. I need to pick up some documents James kept here, business-related. I don't think now's a good time, Caroline replied evenly. I'm not asking, Alyssa said softly. I'm telling you. That tone, smooth, low, dangerous, sent a shiver through her. Whatever you're looking for, Caroline said, tightening her grip on the doorknob, you won't find it here. For a moment, their eyes met 2 women bound by grief, divided by secrets. Alyssa smiled faintly. You always underestimated me, Caroline. Then she turned and walked away. Later, after the SUV disappeared, Caroline sat alone in the darkened living room. The only light came from the embers in the fireplace. She opened her laptop and searched Vaughn Holdings. Dozens of results appeared: shell companies, empty offices, real estate projects spanning Colorado, Nevada, Arizona. Most inactive. But one was still active: Vaughn Capital LLC, registered in Denver, last transaction 2 weeks before James's death. Her breath quickened. She copied the data into a notepad. She whispered to herself, James, what did you get yourself into? The next morning, Andrew finally called. I got your message, he said, sounding shaken. Caroline, don't tell anyone about that recording. Not yet. We need to authenticate it. You believe it's real? I believe your son was trying to protect you. And Owen? Caroline's voice broke. He said he'd send proof that night, but I don't have it. Andrew was silent for a moment. Then maybe someone else does. That afternoon, Caroline went to James's office building. The receptionist remembered her. Mrs. Reed, she said kindly. James was such a good man. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Caroline said. I just need to collect some personal items from his desk. The woman hesitated, then nodded. Of course. Inside the office, sunlight filtered through blinds, painting thin lines across the desk. Everything looked undisturbed except one drawer that wouldn't open. Locked. She tugged harder. Something rattled. She knelt and looked underneath. Taped to the bottom of the drawer was a small envelope labeled private. Inside was a USB drive. Her pulse raced. At home, she plugged it into her laptop. Dozens of files appeared: documents, bank statements, one video file named Proof. She clicked play. The screen flickered to life: grainy security footage from a parking garage. James standing near his car, arguing with a man, Derek Vaughn. Then a flash of movement behind them, a second figure stepping from the shadows. Blonde hair, a glint of metal. The video cut off there. Caroline's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. She replayed it again, every frame more chilling than the last. It wasn't just grief anymore, it was betrayal. It was one of those betrayal stories that people think only happen in movies, but this was real and it was hers. She forwarded the file to Andrew with a message: "We found what he was trying to send." Then she leaned back, shaking, tears running silently down her face. "James tried to warn me," she whispered, "and I didn't see it." Outside, wind howled again, carrying the faint echo of what felt like voices: memory, guilt, love. This was no longer a story about loss. It was about survival. Some betrayal stories end in anger, some in truth, and some in justice. Which do you believe this one deserves? Tap 0 if you'd forgive. Tap 1 if you'd fight. And if this story kept you watching, don't forget to like it. Tells me you're still listening. Some people say fear paralyzes you. Others say it sharpens your senses. For Caroline Reed, it did both, because what she found after the video would turn her grief into a fight she never imagined leading. Stay until the end, because courage sometimes begins in the smallest, quietest act of defiance. When the video ended, Caroline just sat there, her breath shallow, the faint hum of the laptop filling the room. The screen still showed James's face, frozen, mid-turn, eyes widened, mouth about to speak, then black. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone. She called Andrew Keller immediately. He picked up on the first ring. "Caroline, I found something," she whispered. "A USB drive in his office. There's video footage. It's James and Derek Vaughn, and someone else, a woman." Andrew's breath caught. "Send it to me right now. Don't move until I call you back." She did as told, forwarding the file through a private email. Then she sat there in the silence of her living room, the fire dying down to dull embers. It was 2:40 a.m. again, the same hour the hospital had called weeks earlier. That detail chilled her, as if the night had a memory of its own. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and relentless. She tried to stay awake, but exhaustion dragged her under. When she woke, sunlight poured across the floor, revealing footprints, faint, wet, and unfamiliar, near James's old study door. Caroline froze. She hadn't gone in there since returning from the office yesterday. The lock was old, but she knew she'd turned it. She approached slowly, pulse thudding in her ears. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, the air smelled faintly of mud and cologne, not hers, not James's. On the desk, someone had left a single white rose. She stared at it for a long moment, her throat dry. White roses had been Alyssa's favorite. No note, no sound, only the whisper of the furnace turning on in the distance. She backed away, closed the door quietly, and called Andrew again. No answer. Then, as she stood there gripping the phone, a thought hit her: the security system. James had installed one the year before he died. Maybe it had recorded something. She went to the closet and pulled out the old tablet that connected to the cameras. Battery dead. She plugged it in, waited, and after what felt like forever, the screen came to life. At 2:17 a.m., the same cursed time motion sensors had triggered. Camera 3, the backyard. A figure in a dark coat walking toward the back door. The footage was grainy, but the gait, calm, deliberate, chilled her. The person stopped, turned briefly toward the camera, then disappeared into shadow. And on the collar of the coat, a glimpse of white fabric, silk scarf maybe. Caroline sat down hard on the couch, her breath catching. Her first thought wasn't Alyssa. It was Derek. But then who left the rose? She forwarded the clip to Andrew with a message: someone was here last night. This time he called within minutes. "Lock every door and window," he said firmly. "I'm driving up. Andrew, I don't want you. I'm on my way." She wanted to argue, but didn't. When she hung up, she went room to room, securing every lock. The old wood creaked as if the house were sighing along with her. By the time Andrew arrived, the snow had thickened, blanketing the driveway. His car's headlights cut through the fog. He entered briskly, shaking off the cold. "Show me," he said. She replayed the footage. He leaned in close, his brow furrowing. "That's not random, Caroline. Someone's trying to scare you. A white rose that's not a threat. That's a message." "Alyssa," she said flatly. He didn't disagree. "Maybe, but we'll need evidence before accusing anyone." Caroline nodded, though her stomach churned. "I can't live like this. She's already taken my son. I won't let her take my grandson." "That's exactly why we need to be careful," Andrew said. "We'll go through official channels, But there's something else. The Denver DA's office is reviewing James's case now. Someone forwarded them that video anonymously. Caroline blinked. You didn't? He shook his head. No, someone else wanted that footage seen. Her heart skipped. Then whoever it was, they're watching us too. That night Caroline couldn't sleep. Every noise, every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. She sat by the window holding a cup of tea gone cold, staring at the snow outside. At 11:45 p.m., a car slowed in front of the house. Headlights lingered, then faded as the car drove off. She exhaled shakily. Grief and fear had become her constant companions, but somewhere beneath them something else was forming. Resolve. If they wanted to intimidate her, they'd chosen the wrong woman. The next morning she drove to the cemetery, parking near the spot where James rested beneath the pine trees. Snow still clung to his headstone. She brushed it away gently, her gloved hands trembling. James, she whispered, they're not done with us, but neither am I. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the polished marble. For the first time in weeks, her voice didn't shake. She turned, walked back to the car, and dialed Andrew. We're not waiting anymore, she said. We're going to the police. He hesitated. That might trigger Alyssa. Then let her be triggered, Caroline said. I'm done being afraid. The officer at the Boulder precinct listened carefully as Caroline described everything: the break-in, the rose, the video, the threats. He promised to send someone to inspect the property. Andrew handled the paperwork, explaining the legal nuances she couldn't bear to process. When it was done, they sat together in the car heaters, blowing warm air against the cold glass. Caroline, Andrew said quietly, you're doing the right thing. But this could get messy. If Alyssa feels cornered. She's already cornered, Caroline said, and she knows it. When they returned to her house that afternoon, a police cruiser was already parked out front. Officer Daniels, a tall man with kind eyes, greeted them. We didn't find signs of forced entry, he said, but we did find boot impressions in the snow size 9, likely male. The rose might have been placed after midnight. Male, Caroline repeated. Daniels nodded. We'll compare with any local reports. Andrew thanked him, but Caroline's mind was racing. Male. What if Derek had come himself? That night, as she replayed the security footage once more, she noticed something she hadn't before when the intruder turned toward the camera, the faint glint of a watch on his wrist. She zoomed in frame by frame until the blurry image sharpened just enough to reveal a dark faceplate and a distinctive logo, Vaughn Capital. Her chest tightened. She picked up her phone and texted Andrew it was Derek. I can prove it. The next morning, news broke that Vaughn Capital had been raided by the Denver DA's Financial Crimes Unit. Dozens of documents seized, several employees questioned, including Derek Vaughn. By noon, Alyssa showed up at Caroline's doorstep again, her tone brittle, her voice trembling not from cold but fury. You think you're helping James by dragging our names through the mud? She snapped. I'm helping the truth, Caroline replied. Alyssa's expression hardened. You have no idea what you've started. Neither did you, Caroline said quietly. The silence between them crackled heavy and electric. After Alyssa left, Caroline locked the door, leaning against it, heart pounding. For the first time, she realized she wasn't just defending memories, she was defending legacy. Fear still lived in her bones, but it no longer controlled her. She opened her journal, the one James had given her years ago, and wrote on the first blank page. They wanted me silent. They forgot who raised my son. That night, she poured herself a small glass of wine, sat by the window again, and watched snowflakes spin through the streetlight glow. The fear was still there, but now it shared space with something steadier purpose. Because when the world takes everything from you, the only thing left to lose is fear itself. She closed her eyes, whispering into the dark, James, if you're watching, I'm ready. Outside, a faint sound broke the stillness, a car door closing, footsteps crunching over snow. She looked up, heart in her throat, but this time she didn't hide. She turned on the porch light, walked to the window, and faced the night head on. No movement, just silence. But for the first time since the call from the hospital, she wasn't afraid of it. Fear can freeze you, or it can forge you. Which would it do to you if Caroline's courage moved you tap, like to let her know she's not standing alone? What happens when grief turns to anger and anger meets manipulation? Some family revenge stories begin with shouting. Others begin with silence. Stay until the end because the next words out of Owen's mouth will tear Caroline's heart in two. Snow still dusted the eaves when Caroline woke to the sound of the front gate clanging shut. She glanced through the curtains, a delivery van idling, Alyssa stepping out in a gray wool coat, sunglasses again like armor. Alyssa waved a bright smile. Morning, I brought Owen for the weekend like the court agreed. Caroline forced her own smile. He's always welcome here. Owen jumped from the car, backpack bouncing, face half hidden under his hood. He looked smaller than before, quieter. Hi, Grandma, he said softly. She hugged him tight. Hi, sweetheart. Alyssa leaned against the car door. Please remember no talk about the investigation around him. He's been anxious lately. Caroline's jaw tightened. I wouldn't burden him with that. Good, Alyssa said, tone sugary and sharp. We wouldn't want confusion influencing custody reviews. She drove away, tires spinning on gravel, leaving a cloud of snow behind her. Inside, Owen settled by the fireplace, sketching in a notebook. Caroline made hot chocolate the same way she used to for James. Your mom says school's been busy, Caroline said. He nodded without looking up. Mom says you don't like her. Caroline froze. Did she? He nodded again. She says you want to take me away. The spoon clattered against the cup. No, honey. I'd never take you away. I just want you safe. Owen looked up, eyes uncertain. Then why are people saying you made Dad sick? Her breath hitched. Who told you that? Mom said maybe you stressed him out too much, he whispered. That's why his head hurt. Caroline felt something snap inside, not loudly, but with precision. She took his hands gently. Sweetheart, that isn't true. Grown-ups say hurtful things when they're scared. Your dad loved us both. You know that, right? He nodded, unsure. When he went upstairs to nap, Caroline sat alone at the kitchen table, trembling. This wasn't just grief anymore, it was war. Later that night, while folding Owen's clothes, she heard a faint click inside his backpack. She opened it, and there under the lining, a small black device blinked once before going dark. A microphone. Her throat went dry. She pulled it out, set it on the counter, and stared. Who did this? The brand was familiar, a nanny cam model James once used years ago when Owen was a toddler. The memory hit hard the night James told her laughing mom, now even the walls can talk. Now they truly did. She called Andrew. Found something, she said, voice low, a recording device in Owen's backpack. He swore softly. That's wiretapping. Illegal even for a parent. She's trying to paint me unstable, Caroline said. Whatever I say here, she'll twist. Then we turn it around, he said. Keep it running. Feed her what she wants to hear, but on your terms. Caroline hesitated. You want me to lie? I want you to survive, he replied. So she left the device in place. Over the next 2 days, Caroline played her part, light conversations, calm tone. She read stories to Owen, sang softly at bedtime. Once she deliberately spoke near the backpack. I worry about forgetting simple things, she murmured aloud. Age catches up, doesn't it? It was bait, and Alyssa took it. 2 nights later, Caroline received an email from the family court liaison concern raised regarding your cognitive stability. She laughed bitterly. So predictable. Andrew texted moments later, she's using the recording, but we have chain of custody proof now. Leave everything to me. Caroline replied, not everything. She still has Owen. The next morning, Alyssa showed up again, pretending civility. Did Owen behave? She asked sweetly. He's wonderful as always, Caroline said. Alyssa smiled thinly. That's good. He told me you were talking to yourself again. Caroline met her gaze. Funny he didn't mention the camera in his backpack. For the first time, Alyssa's face faltered. I don't know what you're talking about. Caroline stepped closer. I think you do. The air between them crackled like static. You think you can intimidate me? Alyssa hissed. You're just an old woman with a house full of ghosts. Caroline smiled faintly. Ghosts have good memories. Alyssa turned sharply and left, slamming the door behind her. That evening, Owen asked, Why are you and Mom always fighting? Caroline knelt beside him. Because sometimes love gets lost between adults who forgot how to listen. He nodded solemnly. Dad used to say people get mean when they're scared. She smiled sadly. Your dad was right. When he fell asleep, she sat by the window staring into the dark yard, every shadow alive. Somewhere out there, Alyssa was plotting her next move. Caroline could feel it like weather changing. At 1:00 a.m. her phone buzzed. Unknown number, she answered cautiously. Hello. A distorted voice stopped digging Mrs. Reed or next time the boy gets hurt. Her stomach dropped. Who is this? Click. The line went dead. She called Andrew, voice shaking. We expected this, he said quietly. It means we're close. Close to what, losing everything? No, to the truth. The next morning, Caroline took Owen to school herself. In the parking lot, she saw Alyssa waiting by her car, chatting with another parent, laughter bright and hollow. Alyssa waved cheerfully at her, a perfect suburban mother. But Caroline saw it now, the mask, the performance. She realized these weren't just betrayals. They were rehearsed scenes in a bigger act, one of those family revenge stories that start quietly and end like a courtroom explosion. And she was done being the quiet one. That afternoon, Caroline visited the district attorney's office with Andrew. They handed over the audio device, chain of custody logs, and timestamps proving Alyssa's tampering. The DA, a composed woman in her 50s, leaned back in her chair. This is significant, she said. If authentic, it demonstrates psychological manipulation and harassment. We'll open a formal investigation. Caroline exhaled for the first time in days. Outside the courthouse, snow began to fall again, flakes drifting down like ash. Andrew turned to her. You're doing good, Caroline. She gave a faint smile. No, I'm just doing what any mother would. That night, as she tucked Owen into bed, he whispered, Grandma, if Mom says mean things about you, Ken, I just pretend I didn't hear. Tears pricked her eyes. Yes, sweetheart, you can always choose kindness. He smiled half asleep. Dad would like that. She brushed his hair back. Yes, he would. Downstairs, she sat before the fire, the letter from James still tucked in her hand. Trust Andrew. Protect Owen. The words burned brighter now, like a map through storm. She wasn't the woman who trembled anymore. Fear had done its job. It had turned her steel. Outside, wind rattled the windows. A branch scraped the glass, sounding almost like a whisper, keep going. And she would. Because some fights aren't chosen, they're inherited. And some wars aren't about vengeance, but about restoring the truth of love. Every time someone fights for family, the ghosts of justice wake up. Do you think Caroline will win this battle, or will the past strike back first? Leave your thought in the comments, and if you're still standing with her, give this story a like so she knows she's not fighting alone. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, keep going. This part of Caroline's story isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming truth in a world built on lies. Stay until the end because justice has a sound, and it's the sound of silence breaking. The morning of the hearing arrived cold and gray. Snow fell in lazy spirals over Boulder County Courthouse, settling softly on the granite steps. Caroline stood at the base of those steps, clutching her gloves, staring up at the tall doors. She felt the same chill she'd felt the night James died, but this time the cold didn't scare her. Andrew Keller walked beside her, briefcase in hand. You ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. They entered through the security checkpoint, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. The courthouse smelled of old paper polish and tension. In courtroom 3B, Alyssa sat at the opposite table, perfectly composed, a black suit, blonde hair, pulled tight expression, polished into sympathy. Beside her, her lawyer whispered something. She nodded slowly, eyes fixed forward. Caroline's stomach twisted. How easily Alyssa wore innocence. Judge Reynolds, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and silver hair, called the room to order. This hearing concerns the petition for temporary guardianship of Owen Reed and allegations of coercion, harassment, and tampering. Let's proceed. Andrew rose first. His tone was calm, measured. Your Honor, my client Mrs. Caroline Reed seeks guardianship of her grandson Owen after evidence surfaced that Mrs. Alyssa Monroe Reed engaged in acts designed to intimidate and discredit her. We'll provide physical and digital proof. The opposing attorney smirked. We'll see about authenticity, Mr. Keller. Caroline sat quietly, heart pounding, as the first exhibits were presented: the nanny cam device, the fake recordings Alyssa planted, and the DA's statement confirming a preliminary investigation into Vaughn Capital. Andrew's words cut through the courtroom with precision. James Reed was not paranoid. He was preparing to protect his family from financial manipulation. His death left those plans unfinished, but his mother found the proof. Alyssa's lawyer objected. Speculative and emotional. Sustained, the judge said. Stick to evidence, Mr. Keller. Andrew nodded and pressed on. When it was Alyssa's turn to speak, she did what she always did best: perform. Her voice quivered perfectly. Her eyes glistened on cue. I've lost my husband, Your Honor. And now, I'm losing my son. Caroline has always resented me. She's fabricating a narrative to steal Owen. I'm a mother trying to hold on to the only family I have left. Her attorney handed up photos of her and Owen smiling at a school fair. A ripple went through the audience sympathy. Caroline lowered her eyes, breathing slowly. She could feel the anger building, pressing behind her ribs like fire. But she remembered Andrew's words. Don't let her bait you. Truth doesn't shout. When her turn came, Caroline stood slowly. Her hands shook, but her voice didn't. Your Honor, she said, I buried my son 6 weeks ago. I never wanted to be in this courtroom. But when I found out my grandson was being used as a weapon in someone else's game, I couldn't stay silent. Her voice broke for a moment, then steadied again. This isn't about winning. It's about what's right. James trusted me to keep Owen safe, and I intend to keep that promise. Judge Reynolds nodded once. Thank you, Mrs. Reed. By afternoon, tension in the room had reached a fever pitch. Evidence was piling up, but Alyssa's attorney kept twisting each fact, turning it into confusion. Andrew called his final witness. Mrs. Ruth McAllister, he said. Caroline looked up sharply. Her neighbor, the quiet widow who lived 2 houses down, walked slowly to the stand. Ruth was small, gray-haired, wrapped in a lavender scarf. No one had mentioned her name before. Alyssa's lawyer frowned, clearly blindsided. Mrs. McAllister, Andrew said gently, how do you know the Reeds? I've been their neighbor for 20 years, she said. Her voice was soft but clear. James used to fix my mailbox. Caroline brought me soup when my husband died. And on the night of January 5th, did you witness anything unusual at the Reed residence? Ruth hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Around 11:30 p.m., I saw a car parked near Caroline's house. I thought it was odd, so I recorded a bit on my doorbell camera. Andrew approached the bench holding up a small flash drive. Permission to play Exhibit E. The screen came to life. The grainy footage showed Alyssa standing at Caroline's porch, whispering into her phone. Derek, I'm telling you she won't back off. If she doesn't stop, we'll have to finish what we started. The courtroom gasped. Alyssa shot to her feet. That's manipulated. Sit down, her lawyer hissed. Judge Reynolds raised a hand, quiet in the court. Andrew paused the video. Your Honor, this was retrieved directly from Mrs. McAllister's doorbell device. Metadata confirms authenticity. The judge studied the screen, lips pressed thin. Alyssa's mask cracked, not visibly, but Caroline could feel it, the tremor in her hand, the twitch at the corner of her mouth. The judge recessed for 15 minutes. Caroline stepped into the hallway, her knees weak. Andrew joined her, smiling faintly. We might just have turned the tide. Caroline exhaled, tears gathering. Ruth, she never said a word. She said she didn't want to make things worse, Andrew replied. But when she heard about the threats to Owen, she decided it was time. Caroline pressed a hand over her heart. That's courage. When the session resumed, the tone in the courtroom had shifted. Alyssa's lawyer looked pale, papers trembling slightly in his hand. Andrew stood one last time. Your Honor, this case began as grief. It became manipulation. But what it truly reveals is the resilience of a woman who refused to let her family's legacy be rewritten by greed. James trusted his mother for a reason. The judge looked at Caroline. Do you have anything to add before I make my ruling? Caroline rose slowly. The sunlight from the high windows caught the silver in her hair. I just want Owen to grow up knowing his father was a good man, she said. Not a name in a lawsuit. Not a pawn in a fight. Just a boy who was loved in a family that survived. The room went silent. When Judge Reynolds finally spoke, her words were steady and final. This court grants temporary guardianship of Owen Reed to Mrs. Caroline Reed pending completion of the ongoing investigation into Mrs. Monroe Reed's conduct. A murmur swept through the gallery. Caroline's knees nearly gave out, but Andrew steadied her. You did it, he whispered. Across the room, Alyssa sat frozen, her lawyer whispering urgently, but she didn't move. For the first time, her eyes showed fear. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Questions flew, Mrs. Reed. How do you feel? Is this justice? Caroline stopped on the steps, snow falling lightly around her. Justice, she said softly, isn't about punishment. It's about truth finally being heard. The cameras clicked. She turned away, walking down the steps, snow crunching beneath her boots. For the first time in months, each step felt lighter. That night, she tucked Owen into bed. The boy smiled sleepily. Grandma, he murmured, Dad would be proud, huh? Caroline brushed his hair back. Yes, sweetheart, he would. Downstairs, she poured herself tea instead of wine, staring at the flickering fire. Her house was quiet again, but this time it wasn't the silence of fear. It was peace earned. She opened her old journal and wrote, Courage doesn't erase fear, it stands beside it. Do you believe courage can change the outcome of a life? If you do hit that like button, it tells me you believe justice even late still matters. Sometimes victory doesn't sound like applause. It sounds like quiet breathing after months of holding it in. Stay until the end, because when the truth finally comes home, it doesn't knock, it breaks the door open. Snow had melted from the courthouse steps by the time Caroline walked down them again, this time without cameras waiting. The papers were signed. Guardianship was hers. Alyssa's appeal had been denied. For the first time in months, Caroline's house didn't feel like a battlefield. Owen's laughter echoed in the hallways again, that small, pure sound she thought she'd never hear. Each morning began the same oatmeal school drop-off coffee with Ruth at the kitchen window. Life fragile and familiar had returned. But peace, Caroline had learned, never came without ghosts. 3 weeks after the ruling, a courier arrived at her door with an envelope stamped Office of the District Attorney Forensic Division. The return address made her chest tighten. Inside was a single-page report. She unfolded it carefully, eyes scanning the words. Post-mortem toxicology indicates trace levels of methylxanthine compound inconsistent with prescribed medication. Source identified as sample batch manufactured by Vaughn Pharmaceuticals, Denver. She read it again and again. Her knees buckled slightly. She sat down hard in the nearest chair, heart pounding. James hadn't just died. He'd been helped toward death. Andrew arrived 20 minutes later. She handed him the report without speaking. He read it once, jaw tightening. They found it. Stimulant compound, Derek's company. Enough to raise suspicion, he said grimly. Not enough for a murder charge yet, but this changes everything. Caroline's voice was barely a whisper. It means he knew. He felt it coming. Andrew placed a hand on her shoulder. Caroline will let the DA handle it. You've done your part. But her mind wasn't on legalities anymore. It was on the last voicemail James left her. If something happens to me, it wasn't natural. Now she knew he was right. That night, after putting Owen to bed, she sat by the fireplace watching snow fall again beyond the window. The room was quiet except for the soft tick of the mantel clock. She thought about how justice rarely looked like she imagined. No confetti, no catharsis. Just truth sitting heavy in your lap. And yet she felt something else, too. Not joy, not sadness, something lighter. Release. A sudden sound broke her thoughts, the creak of the porch boards. Her heart jolted. Through the frosted window, she saw headlights cutting across the drive. A car door opened. A figure stepped out, dark coat, pale face. Alyssa. Caroline stood slowly, pulse quickening. She moved to the door, unlocked it, but didn't open it. Then came the knock, sharp, desperate. Caroline, please, just let me in. Her voice was strained, no longer confident, trembling. Against her better judgment, Caroline opened the door a few inches. Alyssa stood on the porch, hair damp from melting snow, eyes wild. You don't understand what they're going to do to me. Who? Derek's partners? They think I talked to the DA. They're watching me. Caroline studied her face. The once perfect mask was gone. What stood before her was fear itself, raw and unfiltered. You brought this on yourself, Alyssa. I didn't kill him, she cried. I didn't. Derek did, but I didn't stop him. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Caroline's throat closed. You knew. Tears streaked Alyssa's face. I didn't think it would happen like that. He said it would just make him sick, not... She choked. I swear I didn't know. Caroline stepped back. You watched him die. Alyssa shook her head violently. I loved him. No, Caroline said quietly. You loved what he gave you. Lightning flashed outside, the storm finally breaking. Wind howled through the trees. Alyssa gripped the doorframe. They're coming for me, Caroline. I need Owen. He's the only thing that makes me look human again. Caroline's eyes hardened. You lost that right the day you tried to destroy me. Alyssa took a trembling step forward. Please, let me see him just once. Caroline didn't answer. Behind her, Owen's small voice floated down the stairs. Grandma, who's at the door? Both women froze. Go back upstairs, sweetheart, Caroline called gently. Owen hesitated. Is Mom crying? The question cut through the air like a blade. Alyssa turned toward the sound, whispering, Owen, it's me. Mommy's here. Caroline stepped between them. No, not tonight. Please, Alyssa begged. Something inside Caroline softened not forgiveness, but exhaustion. The war had lasted too long. She opened the door wider. 5 minutes, she said. That's all. Alyssa knelt by the stairs as Owen came down half asleep in his pajamas. She brushed his cheek gently. You've grown, she whispered. I missed you. He looked at her uncertainly. Are you coming home? No, baby, she said. Not for a long time. She kissed his forehead, then looked up at Caroline. Thank you. Caroline said nothing. When Alyssa stood, her shoulders seemed to collapse inward. They'll find me, you know. People like Derek don't forgive betrayal. Caroline's voice was low, steady. Then you'd better run. Alyssa nodded slowly, eyes hollow. Tell Owen. I loved him in my own broken way. Then she turned and walked into the storm. The wind swallowed her shape within seconds. Caroline stood at the open door, snow swirling around her feet, unsure whether she'd just witnessed an ending or an escape. The next morning, she found a voicemail from Andrew. The DA issued warrants for Derek Vaughn and associates. Alyssa's missing. They'll find her, Caroline. It's over. She listened twice, then deleted it. Some things didn't need replaying. That afternoon, she took Owen to the cemetery. He knelt beside James's headstone, tracing the letters with his gloved fingers. Dad's name is fading, he said softly. Caroline smiled sadly. Names fade. Love doesn't. He looked up at her. Are we safe now? She hesitated. I think so, for a while. Good, he said, because I don't like when you're scared. Her heart swelled. Neither do I, sweetheart. That evening, the storm cleared. The mountains glowed pink beneath the winter sunset. Caroline sat by the window, her old journal open. She wrote, Justice isn't a destination. It's a breath you learn to take again after holding it too long. Outside, wind moved softly through the trees, the same trees that once seemed menacing now, whispering peace. On the mantel, James's photo caught the last of the daylight. Caroline lifted her cup of tea in a quiet toast. You can rest now, she murmured. Later, as night settled, she heard Owen laughing upstairs, a small, joyous sound that didn't belong to fear anymore. Caroline leaned back, closing her eyes. The house was warm. And for the first time in months, she didn't flinch at every creak or whisper. The war was over. She wasn't just a survivor. She was the keeper of her family's truth. Sometimes triumph doesn't come with victory speeches. It comes with quiet forgiveness. If you believe peace after pain is the greatest justice of all, tap like and stay for the next chapter. Because Caroline's story isn't done, it's only just begun. What you're about to hear isn't just an ending, it's what happens after survival. Because sometimes the quiet years after the storm are where love does its best work. Stay until the end, because James's final letter will remind you what forgiveness really sounds like. 2 winters passed before Caroline realized she'd stopped counting days by grief. It happened quietly, like waking from a long sleep and realizing the house was no longer cold. Owen was 10, now taller, freckled, his laughter echoing through the kitchen on Saturday mornings as he fed the dog and spilled milk on purpose. Caroline would scold him lightly, but she smiled every time. Her garden, once overgrown and silent, bloomed again, that spring lilacs, tulips, and the climbing roses James had planted years ago. The wounds of the past hadn't vanished. They had simply grown softer around the edges, the way scar tissue turns pale with time. Every Thursday, she met Andrew at the cafe downtown, same corner booth, same ritual. He still practiced law, but talked more about hiking trails than depositions now. That morning, he placed a brown envelope on the table. This came from the DA's office, he said. They finally closed the Vaughn investigation. Derek's serving 12 years. The others pled out. Caroline nodded slowly. And Alyssa, she's been off the grid for months. Word is she's in Oregon under her maiden name. Caroline stared out the window. I hope she's found some peace. Andrew smiled faintly. You just said that without bitterness? That's new. She laughed softly. Bitterness is heavy. I got tired of carrying it. He hesitated, then slid a second envelope across the table, smaller, older, sealed in wax. This one was in James's estate box. I just got permission to release it to you. Caroline froze. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable, Mom. At home, she sat by the fire, the letter trembling in her hands. The paper had yellowed slightly. She broke the seal and unfolded it slowly. Mom, if you're reading this, something went wrong. Maybe I pushed too hard or trusted the wrong people. But I want you to know I was never afraid for myself, only for Owen, and for you. You always said love wasn't about protection, it was about preparing. So that's what I tried to do. I've set aside something for you, for him, for the town that made us who we are. Andrew knows the details. It's not much, but maybe it can fix something that I couldn't. Don't let anger be the last word. You once told me forgiveness isn't a gift for others, it's freedom for the soul. Please don't spend the rest of your life in the courtroom of memory. Step outside. Love always, James. The words blurred through her tears. She pressed the letter to her chest and closed her eyes. The next morning she called Andrew. You said there were details. He smiled on the phone. Meet me at the old community center tomorrow. The building sat at the edge of Boulder Creek, weathered but still standing. As Caroline approached, she saw a metal sign half buried in Vine's Reed Family Resource Center, in memory of James Reed. Her breath caught. Through the window, she could see painters inside, volunteers arranging bookshelves, a group of kids laughing as they unpacked donated toys. Andrew joined her at the doorway. He'd started the paperwork months before he died, quietly through a shell account. He wanted it to be a place for families in trouble, people who'd lost everything but still had each other. Caroline smiled through tears. That sounds like him. Now it's yours to run if you want. She stepped inside, the air filled with the scent of new paint and coffee. And for the first time since that night at Mercy Hospital, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The next few months passed in a rhythm she hadn't known. She needed meetings with volunteers, fundraising events, late nights writing grant proposals. The work healed her in ways therapy never could. Owen often came along after school, helping stack boxes or color posters for the children's room. Dad would like this, he'd say proudly. Yes, she'd reply he would. Sometimes she'd catch him looking at his father's photo on the wall, smiling, not crying, and realize the healing had passed on to him, too. One evening, as she was locking up the center, she noticed a woman standing near the edge of the parking lot, slender, wearing a denim jacket and a scarf that covered half her face. Caroline's heart skipped. Alyssa. For a moment, neither moved. The air was crisp, the sky washed in the amber of late spring. Finally, Alyssa stepped closer. You don't have to call anyone. I just came to see the place. Caroline studied her. Her once polished beauty was gone, replaced by something gentler, worn, but human. It's his, Alyssa said quietly. He'd talked about it once. Said Boulder needed a place like this. I never believed he'd actually do it. Caroline nodded slowly. He did, and you helped more than you know. Alyssa's eyes filled. You could have destroyed me, Caroline. I deserved it, but you didn't. I almost did, Caroline admitted. Then I remembered what James would have wanted. A long silence followed, the kind that didn't hurt anymore. Alyssa glanced toward the building where Owen's laughter echoed faintly inside. Does he ever ask about me? Sometimes, Caroline said softly. I tell him you loved him. Because you did in your way. Alyssa's lip trembled. Thank you. She turned to leave. Alyssa, Caroline said, stopping her. Be well. For the first time in years, Alyssa smiled small, fragile, real. You too. Then she walked away into the twilight, her silhouette fading like an old memory finally ready to rest. That night, Caroline sat at her desk rereading James's letter one more time. Each word felt different now, no longer a goodbye, but a bridge between what was broken and what had begun again. She opened her journal, the same one filled with years of pain and fear, and wrote, Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering without the ache. Months later, the community center officially opened. The ceremony was small, a mix of neighbors, volunteers, and families whose stories mirrored her own. Caroline stood at the podium, Owen beside her, Andrew in the front row. 2 years ago, she began, I thought my life was over. I thought loss was something you survive once and never recover from. But I was wrong. Loss is a teacher. It empties you, and if you let it, it fills you again with something wiser. She looked at Owen. My son James believed that family isn't defined by blood, but by the people who stay when everything else falls apart. This center is his legacy, not of money, but of love rebuilt. Applause filled the small hall, gentle but heartfelt. Afterward, Owen tugged her sleeve. Dad would have been proud. Caroline smiled, tears shining in her eyes. He already is. That evening, after the crowd left, Caroline walked along Boulder Creek. The air smelled of pine and river water. The mountains in the distance glowed gold. She thought about how far they'd come from the storm to this quiet dusk. Her phone buzzed. A message from Andrew. You did it, Caroline. She replied simply, we did. Back home, she made tea and sat by the window, the letter still beside her. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of roses, the white ones finally blooming again in the yard. Owen's laughter drifted down from upstairs. Caroline closed her eyes, letting the sound fill her chest. Peace, she realized, wasn't the absence of pain. It was the presence of meaning. Weeks later, she visited the cemetery one last time that spring. She placed fresh flowers on James's grave, white and red roses mixed together like forgiveness and love side by side. I kept my promise, she whispered. He's safe, and so am I. The breeze stirred her hair as if in answer. She smiled and walked away slowly, sunlight spilling across the path. Healing doesn't erase the scars, it teaches you to see beauty in them. If this story touched your heart, give it a like and tell me, what would forgiveness look like for you? What you're about to hear isn't just the end of a story, it's a letter to everyone who's ever loved, lost, and dared to begin again. Stay until the end, because the lesson Caroline leaves behind may change the way you see your own life. 2 years had passed since the community center opened, and Boulder had changed in small but beautiful ways. The town no longer carried whispers of scandal or sorrow. Instead, people spoke of rebirth. The old buildings were painted again. Children's laughter filled the parks, and the Reed Family Resource Center became a place where broken stories found their way back to light. Caroline stood by the window of her office one morning, watching spring sunlight spill across the foothills. On her desk lay a new letter, an invitation from the city council. They wanted her to speak at the grand reopening of the Boulder Library, newly restored with a reading room dedicated to James Reed. She stared at the embossed seal for a long time. Her son's name carved into a place of learning felt like a circle closing. That afternoon she drove through the old streets. Boulder looked softer now, the kind of beauty that comes from endurance rather than perfection. Owen, now 11, sat beside her in the passenger seat, humming along to the radio. Are you nervous, Grandma? He asked. She smiled. A little. It's been a long time since I spoke in front of people. You always tell me stories, he said. This is just more people. Caroline laughed. You make it sound easy. He grinned. It is. You just talk from your heart. That night, while Owen slept, she sat at her writing desk with a cup of tea and an open notebook. The letter from the council lay beside her, and she began to write her speech, not with formality, but with truth. Each word felt like a seed planted in the soil of memory. The next day, the library's courtyard was filled with sunlight and people, families, children, neighbors, and volunteers from the center. A banner stretched across the entrance, a new chapter for Boulder. Caroline walked slowly toward the podium, her gray hair brushed neatly, her pearl earrings, the ones James had given her, catching the light. She took a deep breath and began. When I was a young mother, I used to think that love meant protection, building walls around the people you care about. I learned too late that love isn't about walls. It's about doors, the kind you open even after they've been slammed in your face. The crowd was silent, listening. I lost my son in a way no mother should. She continued, her voice steady but soft. And for a long time I thought that loss defined me. But what I've learned is that grief doesn't erase love. It deepens it. It makes it real in ways comfort never could. She looked around the audience, her gaze finding familiar faces, Ruth, Andrew, the volunteers, even strangers whose lives the center had touched. Forgiveness, she said, isn't weakness. It's the last act of love we give ourselves when we're ready to stop bleeding. It's the courage to say, this pain will not own me anymore. Applause began slowly, then grew. Caroline smiled, her throat tight with emotion. She continued, James believed every person deserves a second chance. This library, this community center, they're not monuments to tragedy. They're testaments to what happens when people choose compassion over revenge. After the ceremony, people gathered around to thank her. A young woman approached, dark-haired, carrying a little boy who clung shyly to her shoulder. Mrs. Reed, she said in a trembling voice, your story saved me. Caroline blinked. Saved you? The woman nodded. I was in a bad marriage. I watched your interview on the center's channel about rebuilding after loss. I decided to leave before my son grew up afraid. You made me believe it was possible. Caroline reached out, touching the woman's arm gently. You were brave enough to listen to your own voice. That's what saved you. The woman smiled through tears. Still, thank you. As she walked away, Caroline watched her go, a younger version of herself, perhaps finding peace sooner than she had. That evening, the library emptied, and Caroline stayed behind to wander through the quiet aisles. Dust floated like soft snow in the golden light. She stopped at a plaque near the reading room door. It read, In memory of James Reed, who believed every ending deserves a second draft. She ran her fingers over the letters and whispered, You were right, my boy. When she returned home, Owen was sitting on the porch steps sketching the mountains. He looked up and grinned. How'd it go? It went beautifully, she said. Did you talk about Dad? Yes, she smiled, and about forgiveness. He nodded thoughtfully. I think he forgave you too, Grandma. Her breath caught. Why would he need to? Owen shrugged. For worrying so much. He always said you worried like it was your superpower. She laughed softly, tears glimmering. Maybe it still is. Later that night, she found herself unable to sleep. She stepped outside into the cool air, the moon casting silver light over the garden. The roses were in bloom again, full and fragrant. She bent down, touching one gently. It struck her then how life moves not in straight lines but in circles. Pain gives way to growth. Endings fold quietly into beginnings. In the stillness, she spoke aloud, not to anyone in particular, but to everyone who had been part of her journey. To those who've lost, she whispered, don't be afraid of the silence that follows. It isn't emptiness. It's space where something new will bloom. She looked up at the stars. And to those who hurt you, forgive them not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. Months passed. The community center continued to thrive. The library became a sanctuary again, and Caroline grew older, gracefully, gently. She no longer feared the past. Instead, she carried it like an heirloom, heavy but precious. One afternoon, she recorded a message for the center's online channel, her voice calm and clear. People ask me how I survived everything that happened. The truth is, I didn't survive alone. I had neighbors who listened, a friend who believed in me, and a boy who reminded me that love is still worth trying for. If my story teaches anything, it's this life doesn't take from us without giving something back. Sometimes what it gives is quieter patience, wisdom, compassion. But it's still a gift. She paused, looking into the camera, eyes warm. If you're listening tonight, wherever you are, maybe you're grieving or angry or just tired, remember, forgiveness isn't a sign of surrender. It's a declaration that your heart is still your own. Weeks later, that video reached thousands of views across social media, shared by families, widows, sons, daughters, people who saw a reflection of themselves in her story. Comments flooded in. This made me call my mother again. I cried. Thank you for reminding me that love still wins. I lost everything, but now I feel like maybe I can start again. Caroline never sought fame, but knowing her pain had become someone else's hope, that was the only legacy she'd ever wanted. That winter, Boulder was covered in snow again, soft, clean, forgiving. Caroline sat by the fire with Owen, now almost 12, reading from one of James's old books. He leaned against her shoulder. Do you think stories ever really end, Grandma? She smiled. No, they just change narrators. He grinned sleepily. Then when I grow up, can I tell ours? Promise me you will, she said, kissing his forehead. As the firelight flickered, she thought of James, of Alyssa, of the countless lives intertwined with hers. All of it. Pain, love, redemption had become one long, imperfect, beautiful story. Life doesn't wait for you to be ready to begin again, she said softly, almost to herself. It just begins quietly like dawn. Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, the warmth of peace filled the air. If this story found you tonight, thank you for staying till the end. Maybe you've walked through loss or carried anger longer than you meant to. I hope Caroline's journey reminds you that it's never too late to rewrite your own story. Leave me a comment and tell me what part of her story spoke to your heart the most. Don't forget to subscribe because every week we share new true-to-life stories like this. One story's about resilience, forgiveness, and family. And remember, no matter how dark your winter gets, spring always comes back.